Every year on the 8th of August, Princess Beatrice's birthday is modestly celebrated. A few family photos, a modest homage from her mother, and a day the palace rarely notices. But there's something quite strange about the question that looms over her 38th birthday. This movie cannot be legally discussed until almost all of the viewers have left. Somewhere in London, Queen Elizabeth II's will is concealed. The same rule that sealed Prince Philip's will for 90 years is expected to prevent her will from ever being read. Not by journalists, historians, or even most of her own relatives. This grandchild is kept within if the Queen left her anything at all. However, Elizabeth did something for Beatrice in her final years that she did not do for any other grandchild. Actually, two things in a single day, not in a will, not in a declaration. What Beatrice has done since then might be the closest thing we will ever get to a public reading of that sealed will. In plain sight, at a wedding that the world barely had a chance to see. The answer was never in the vault. It has been in the open all this time. Here's where to look. This is a story about jewelry and a birthday on paper. Actually, it addresses a topic that the palace has never sufficiently addressed. What happens to a king's personal belongings once the crown and history books have seized everything he is entitled to? And among a very vast and very esteemed family, who did the Queen really trust, given that status is public? The public can access the titles. It's not trust. For most of the family, that question is permanently closed with the paperwork. In Beatrice's case, the evidence was never sealed. It just took years for anyone to accurately read it. All of the evidence is easily accessible to the public. 2 pieces were given to the Queen. Beatrice did the third thing 2 years apart, and by the second time, everything that had made the first one made sense had disappeared. On the 8th of August 1988, Princess Beatrice, the eldest daughter of Prince Andrew and Sarah, Duchess of York, was born. For most of her adult life, she was mostly overlooked by royal media. She wore a fascinator at William and Catherine's 2011 wedding, which led to days of ridicule. She was questioned about why she didn't hold a formal role. She was eclipsed by Meghan Markle's arrival, her sister Eugenie's more extravagant wedding, and the standard math of the monarchy: titles, duties, and airtime. The media covered her family branch's increasing marginalization each year. Within the family, the perception was different. Beatrice and Eugenie freely called their grandmother grandma, a term they used again after her death. In an interview with Hello magazine, Beatrice once said as much. Her mother and grandmother were 2 of her role models as a child. Instead of a public obligation, that tie was based on the private calendar. The parts of royal life that are off-limits to cameras include summers at Balmoral and weekends at Windsor. To understand why that tie is significant in this case, you must be aware of one aspect of royal law that is rarely discussed. A monarch's personal possessions, including clothing, jewelry she owned entirely, letters and photographs, function under the law almost like any other person's estate. However, British monarchs make a clear legal distinction between the royal jewels, which pass to the next sovereign immediately and cannot be given away. However, Elizabeth was free to take those away and give them to anybody she wanted. This particular feature is what turns an inheritance narrative into a locked room. Royal wills have traditionally been sealed. After Prince Philip passed away in 2021, a London court sealed his will for 90 years. Elizabeth is expected to be protected in the same way. If it does, there won't be a reading, a list, or a notification. Not while we are alive. Anything that passed from her to her family was never acknowledged. As a result, the only available proof is the kind that is impossible to hide. What the Queen chose to do while she was alive. It is best to start with the tiara. The Queen Mary fringe tiara was developed more than a century ago. On her own wedding day in 1947, Elizabeth wore a blaze of diamond spikes made in 1919 for Queen Mary. That morning, one of the most famous near disasters in royal history took place. While the 21-year-old princess was getting ready for Westminster Abbey, the tiara's frame shattered in the hands of her hairdresser. A court jeweler was sent across London with a police escort to solder the Abbey back together as it began to fill with guests. Elizabeth's marriage had already failed once on the most important day. These things are no longer considered jewelry. They become concrete recollections. The tiara stopped going to weddings after that. It became clear when Princess Anne was married in 1973. After that, no royal bride wore it for 47 years. For 2 whole generations, brides came and went without it. Diana wore the Spencer tiara, Catherine wore the Cartier halo, the Granville emerald cocosnick was gifted to Beatrix's sister Jane. Wedding after wedding, the vaults opened, but the fringe wasn't made public until the 17th of July, 2020. During a global epidemic, Beatrice got married at Windsor in front of a small number of guests. No parade, no balcony kiss, no live broadcast. By royal standards, it was hardly a wedding at all. For that short, almost private ceremony, the Queen also sent the tiara she had worn as a bride 73 years earlier out of the vault. She didn't stop there. In the weeks before the wedding, a vintage Norman Hartnell gown that Elizabeth had worn herself decades earlier was stolen from the Queen's own closet. To fit her granddaughter's dimensions, the monarch's dress was modified seam by seam. Beatrice got married in it. Not a family heirloom that was lent, not a designer's commission. For one bride, a duplicate of the Queen's own gown. Since then, no bride has worn the Queen's bridal tiara, and no other granddaughter has ever tied the knot in the Queen's own dress. The palace never provided an explanation for either choice. It never does. Be cautious of anyone who claims to grasp Elizabeth's intentions, because no one outside of that family can do so. It is possible to say this. It has never been determined what Beatrice would have received, although rulers have long secretly transferred personal wealth to their family through unspoken desires. Elizabeth decided to commit one of her last significant symbolic deeds to the grandchild that the cameras had neglected for 10 years, regardless of what the sealed documents show. A wedding morning sun put into the frame of a tiara and a garment with her own proportions in the seams. It is hard to imagine a more transparent way for a monarch to show her family and the country that they were keeping an eye on her personal trust. Dresses and loans, however, ultimately belong to the Queen. The strongest evidence in this story seems to indicate the contrary. Beatrice had already done the same. Beatrix's children were supposed to inherit the York name, and not much else in royal coverage for a long time. Her daughters don't have any regal titles. Their father, Edoardo Mapelli Mosey, is not a part of the working monarchy at all. In terms of succession, styles, and responsibilities, they are near the bottom of the family tree. When you consider their complete names, the entire statistic becomes absurd. Beatrix's first daughter, Sienna Elizabeth Mapelli Mazzi, was born in September 2021 when her great-grandmother was still alive. Her second child, Athena Elizabeth Rose Mapelli Mazzi, was born in January 2025. The same tribute was chosen twice, more than 3 years apart. And think about how those two options differ from one another. The second time, there was no court to recognize the gift, no grandmother to thank, no living queen to placate, and no possible invitation. A royal could no longer legitimately commend the crown. Still, she carried it out. She wasn't the only one who had this instinct. While his great-grandfather was still alive, her sister Eugenie gave her son a name in February 2021. August Philip Hawkbrooks Bank integrated Prince Philip's into Beatrice's side of the family at the same time as Beatrice folded in Elizabeth's name. Two sisters who had been ignored for years as the monarchy's spare parts quietly turned their children's birth certificates into a family memorial. It's not a sentimental color. The persona that royal observers thought was upholding Elizabeth's heritage is rewritten. The working royals took up her duties, patronages, state functions, and ribbon-cutting ceremonies. But the branch that received the lowest rating is bearing her name, which is what a family actually says out loud every day at breakfast and bedtime. Additionally, be aware of the conditions for this type of inheritance. There was no need to trade tiara. No will have to be opened. No lawyer, no court order, no palace statement, and no confirmation from anyone. Beatrice made the decision twice in a hospital room rather than a castle, and nobody ever had to confirm or deny anything because the birth certificates already did. The fringe tiara will eventually return on a future bride whose ownership was never revealed, as is always the case. After that, the cameras will ask the same question that they did in 2020. Why her? Long after everyone who is watching this has died, the documents that might hold the answer will still be buried and sealed, exactly as they have been from the start. But a will is only one kind of inheritance. Long before any paper could confirm anything, Elizabeth had already demonstrated to her family where her personal trust lay in the simplest language a queen could employ. Titles can be given and taken away. Duties might be reassigned, but no one has the power to restrict what a grandmother lends. Moreover, a woman's choice of names for her children is uncontrollable. She dressed one of the granddaughters in a tiara from her own wedding day and a gown from her own closet. And that grandchild gave the most direct response a mother could have. Somewhere in London, a will that no one will ever read is hidden behind its seal. In 2 nurseries, a name that no one has sealed away is already being shouted aloud every day.